Incredible truth revealed. Blind veteran and K9 service dog, rescued from shocking police attack. Jake stood at the corner of Main Street, the familiar blend of scents and sounds wrapping around him like a warm hug. Scout, his faithful companion, sat at his side, her presence a reassuring anchor in the storm of his uncertain world. As a blind war veteran, Jake relied on her instincts to guide him through life after leaving the battlefield, a realm that still haunted his thoughts. Voices brought him snippets of life, laughter, the clatter of bicycle wheels, the scent of fresh bread wafting from the bakery around the corner. He cherished these mundane moments, where belonging seemed almost tangible. Then, like thunder shattering a peaceful sky, chaos erupted. A police vehicle screeched around the corner, sirens blaring, fraying the calm that had cradled his afternoon. Scout's body bristled, her trained instincts surging to the fore as she took an assertive position beside him. Jake could feel the shift. The tension in the air was palpable. Was this chaos meant for him? Before he could fully grasp what was happening, the officer shouted sharply, misreading Scout's protective stance as aggression. Panic rippled through Jake, his heart racing as confusion unfolded around him. What was this? Tension crackled like electricity, turning the warmth of the town into a hostile environment. Jake! The officer's voice dripped with suspicion, dismissing his service and loyalty as mere shadows of his character. Whispers erupted around him, slicing through the fabric of his community, a community he thought he knew. They were torn, some rushing to his side, defending his past service, while others succumbed to fear, urging him to back away, to relinquish the mitigating power Scout had given him. In the aftermath of confusion, Jake felt the weight of belonging slip through his fingers. He had fought for his country, but here he stood, vulnerable, his very identity eclipsed by the narrow perceptions of those who failed to understand. Jake faced a choice that gnawed at his soul. He could pursue justice, but what if it jeopardized Scout? The thought curled in his gut, sharp and cold, the one thing that grounded him now poised to become a target. Before the turbulent thoughts consumed him entirely, a familiar voice broke through, anchoring him back to a time when chaos felt more defined. It was Sergeant Wellman, a face from his past. A mentor forged in the fires of war, he had taught Jake that vulnerability could become strength. "You need to reclaim your narrative, son," he urged. The words echoed in Jake's mind like a battle cry. "You hold the pen now. Tell your story." As Jake began to embrace the idea of storytelling as a form of resistance, he felt a flicker of hope. Yet the looming threat from the police department cast a shadow over every word he penned. Just as the narrative of his life began to sharpen into focus, he sensed an oppressive force intent on silencing him. This newfound voice for the vulnerable drummed against an unforgiving reality that sought to break his spirit. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Jake's thoughts twisted and turned, he felt the walls closing in. The sense of duty to defend not only himself, but also Scout became a double-edged sword, slicing deeper into the fabric of his heart. There he stood, pen in hand, the indomitable sensation of dread gripping him tighter with each line he wrote. Would anyone hear these truths? Would they even care? In the weight of an unjust system, the bitter taste of defeat gnawed at him. Jake realized he was on the brink of unraveling a compelling world through his words, but uncertainty deepened. Would they accept him, the blind veteran with a fierce K9 by his side, or would they instead choose to perpetuate distrust? A decision loomed before him, entangled with the shadows of a past that refused to let go. The tension swelled, leaving Jake at a precipice where each stroke of his pen held the power to topple empires or shroud his bond with Scout in darkness. The answer lay just beyond reach, as he fought to illuminate the truth before the world turned away. The moment hung in the air, thick with tension and unanswered questions. Jake's heart pounded, each beat a reminder of the battle he faced, not just for his own dignity, but for the very freedom Scout provided. With each word he typed, he felt an unshakable truth rise from the depths of his experience. To shield Scout meant to shield himself. Yet, he could not remain silent. Silence felt like betrayal. He wheeled his thoughts back to his time in service. The camaraderie, the shared laughter in grim times, the clarity of purpose that came with each mission. It was all so different now. The responsibility resting squarely on his fragile shoulders. A stark contrast to the community he had fought to protect. Jake pushed back the self-doubt, forcing the memories to the forefront. He remembered Sergeant Wellman's smile, the way he believed Jake could turn pain into purpose. The old soldier's voice echoed, each syllable a motivating force. Each incident he documented held a flicker of hope, a voice reclaiming agency amidst the chaos. He began to see the stories as weapons, words forged in the fires of his survival. He felt a newfound determination course through him. The narrative was complex, but he was not alone in this. To channel his experience successfully would require brave vulnerability, a point of connection to those who sympathized with his plight. Jake took a deep breath, realizing his growing power lay in weaving together the threads of his experience, crafting a tapestry that revealed more than just his suffering. This was about representation, about breaking down those misconceptions that clung like shadows to both him and Scout. Just as his thoughts crystallized, the weight of his craft shifted. What if revealing truths led to solutions? What if the people of his town wanted to listen, wanted to change? It occurred to him that his inability to see might have robbed him of physical vision, but it didn't have to rob him of clarity. With renewed resolve, Jake began crafting stories that went beyond mere recounting. He envisioned tales of bravery, resilience, connection, stories filled with the glorious way humans and service dogs brought life into focus in unexpected moments. Carefully, he detailed the night Scout had pulled him from danger, how her commitment transcended the physical constraints of his blindness. He wanted people to feel the adrenaline of that heartbeat, to understand that a service dog was not merely a companion, but a lifeline. However, Jake knew he couldn't shy away from the darkness that lingered in the shadows of his narrative. The police encounter rested as a specter in the background, mockingly defiant against the glimmer of hope emerging from the writing. Each typographical tap was met with a mental recalibration of fear. They could retaliate, stigmatize, and dismiss him again. This awareness forced Jake to question his approach further. Should he remain anonymous in his truths? Or did he need to confront the authorities directly? The swell of adrenaline poured into the pit of his stomach, a familiar precursor to battle. He was torn between the instinct to protect and the urge to challenge unfairness. It was a wrestling match of morality. As the afternoon wore on, Jake realized the hourglass of time had shifted. The sun dipped lower, and shadows lengthened around him. It was then that the idea struck him, sculpting a video of his written words, a visual testament countering discrimination. The thought surged with promise. This medium could reach beyond the confines of paper and ink, reaching those he had longed to connect with. Excitement ignited, driving him to his feet. He envisioned the beats of passionate words laced with sincerity. But would that be enough to assuage his fears? Would he project strength through vulnerability? Jake inhaled deeply, his mind racing at the possibilities. In that moment he felt more alive than ever, standing on the precipice of change. The war within him was not over, but he was no longer alone in it. As he leaned in closer to his computer, fingers hovering above the keys, uncertainty washed over him once again. Could he confront the police department transparently, risking further hostility and ire? The answers, he realized, were not yet clear. But now equipped with a voice ready to amplify a truth long suppressed, Jake felt the awakening pulse of a powerful narrative begin to forge beyond himself. And somewhere in the distance, he sensed more than just the finality of choice. He felt the looming approach of a confrontation that would determine the strength of his resolve. Jake hesitated, fingers poised above the keyboard, an unsettling breath caught in his throat. Each shaky inhale and exhale echoed the crackling tension that surged through him. His physical blindness had long ago forced him to refine his other senses, The vibrations of the floor beneath his feet, the distant rustling of leaves outside, even the rhythmic soft panting of Scout beside him. But in this moment, he sensed the undeniable weight of a choice he was unprepared to make. He tuned back into the gravity of the decision hanging before him, crafting a video to share not just his words, but his truth. In a world where digital reach often outstripped the limitations of paper, felt like standing on the edge of a precipice. The alarm of doubt burped within him, stinging as it went. Was he ready to dredge up the shadows that lay in wait? The wind of desperation swirled through his mind as he recalled the sting of those flashed police lights, the murmurs of authority cloaked in intimidation, and the desecration of his autonomy. His stomach twisted with the vulnerability of his predicament. What if sharing his story only led to more danger, more scrutiny from the very establishment that should protect him? Yet, alongside the doubt, a thread of anger ignited, fueling his resolve. Jake had fought too hard, lost too much to back down now. He could no longer navigate this existence quietly, as if his reality were a whisper smeared into insignificance. This could be an act of reclamation, not just for himself but for others whose voices had been stifled by the oppressive weight of fear. He imagined people watching, eyes glued to their screens, feeling both his fear and his determination push through the pixelated haze. Every heartbeat in his chest catalyzed a growing ardor to articulate more than just his story, but also the collective revelation that echoed within those who had suffered in silence for far too long. Driven by necessity, he took a step back, visualizing the sequence he would need to capture. The night of the altercation played in loops in his mind, unraveled and raw. He would articulate the moments leading up to the confrontation, the perception of danger, and then Scout, his faithful companion, the one who saw what he could not. He wanted the world to understand this complex relationship. The essence of trust and survival lay not on the surface, but beneath layers often unseen by average eyes. He resolved to confront his fears head-on. The narrative had to unfold its full weight. It was no longer a game of avoidance, but a testament of facing the truth. Each segment would be a meticulous building block toward understanding, casting light on what had been left in shadow for too long. Jake clicked the camera on, his heartbeat drumming a steady rhythm, his pulse being the only guide as he began speaking, the words spilling out like pent-up water breaking through a dam. As he shared his story, he felt the tension ease. From his voice to his posture, it transformed from a semblance of guardedness to an assertive declaration. After recording, he paused the video and breathed deeply. This was far more than a simple video post. This was an act of rebellion against the chains of silence. But just as the moment swelled with promise, a knock echoed through the room, startling Jake. Scout stirred beside him. Instinctively, she bristled as if sensing an uninvited presence. Jake's heart raced again, not from adrenaline but from the realization that he was no longer alone in this fight. What awaited him on the other side of that door? A confrontation with the past? Or simply a reminder that triumph often arose not only from one's own resolution, but also from the reactions provoked in others? With his newfound determination, he approached the door, each step measured, a tethering of fears to intention. This was his moment to embody the very narrative he had begun to craft. The metal doorknob felt cold against his palm, and without knowing what awaited him outside, he wrenched the door open. Beneath the surface of his growing confidence, however, an unsettling thrum of anxiety quaked through him. Would this initiate the reckoning he craved, or would it unveil deeper scars he wasn't fully prepared to face? The door creaked open, and a familiar figure stepped into the light. Mr. Henderson, the neighborhood watch captain. Jake's breath hitched as he registered the weight of expectation in the man's stance. What did he want? Beneath the surface of their previous encounters, Jake could sense an urgency in Mr. Henderson that tangled with his own apprehension. "Jake," Mr. Henderson said, his voice steady yet low. "I heard about the video you've been working on. Thought we might need to talk." Jake could hardly process the implications. Word of his endeavor had spread quickly. The reality of his raw honesty now reached beyond his humble apartment. Tension folded into the air between them as Jake considered his response. About what? Jake deflected, instinctively aware that navigating this conversation could either fortify or shatter the momentum he had just begun to cultivate. The night of the incident, Mr. Henderson started, in a tone that suggested both regret and urgency. I was in the area, saw everything. I've been trying to think of how I could step in better for others like you, and I think... His voice wavered for just a second, enough for Jake to notice. Maybe we can help each other. Whatever Mr. Henderson intended to convey got tangled in Jake's swirling thoughts. Help? After years of feeling marginalized, the idea of collaboration with someone from his community felt foreign yet tantalizing. The shades of doubt loomed large. What if trusting this man led to more complications, more exposure? "What do you want from me?" Jake demanded, his voice sharper than intended. The heat of past anger came rushing back, a defense mechanism triggered by vulnerability. "Just the truth, Jake. Your truth." As apprehensive as he felt, a thread of relief knotted in the pit of his stomach. He often questioned how one person's experiences could resonate with others, yet here stood Mr. Henderson, suggesting a universality to the injustices they faced. Jake couldn't predict where this conversation might lead, but he recognized the limitations of solitude. Perhaps sharing the burden would lighten it, or illuminate its magnitude. "Well, I don't see how I'm anything special." "That's where you're wrong." Mr. Henderson's words hung in the air, infused with intensity. "Your story matters. It can shake foundations. I believe it could help change things." Jake's heart quickened, but not solely from anxiety. A flicker of determination sparked within him, one that refused to be doused by uncertainty. With every word, he felt propelled forward into uncharted territory, both exhilarating and terrifying. "What's the plan?" Jake finally asked, challenging himself to remain open. Mr. Henderson possessed experience that could either lift him or bury him deeper. "We could arrange a meeting," Mr. Henderson suggested, his tone shifting to one of earnestness. "Others want to hear your voice. We could coordinate. You wouldn't be alone in this." A flicker of hope nudged Jake's resolve, but deep down, doubt whispered its discontent. He loved the power of his narrative, but feared the potential fallout of sharing it more broadly. Would this truly be a reclamation of power, or merely an invitation to more pain? "Maybe," Jake replied, carefully weighing his options. "What if it backfires?" "It might," Mr. Henderson admitted, the honesty bracing. "But imagine if it doesn't. Imagine if your voice inspires change. You have already taken the first step. Let's not halt now." Silence enveloped them both, heavy with the weight of unspoken fears and newfound possibilities. Jake shifted, the prospect of shared struggle giving rise to a courage he'd only begun to tap into. "Let's go forward then," Jake said slowly, feeling the gravity of this agreement settle over him. "But I will need to have control over my narrative." "Absolutely. It's your story." With that affirmation, Jake's anxiety dulled, replaced by a burgeoning sense of purpose. He stepped back from the threshold of hesitation, ready to embrace this complicated intersection of trust, vulnerability, and determination. As Mr. Henderson shared his vision for a meeting, Jake listened intently, every word weaving into the fabric of what could be a new beginning. But just as anticipation began to swell within him, a thought prowled at the edges of his mind. Who else might want a stake in his tail? And might they not see the same truths? The crossroads lay ahead, teeming with potential. That lingering doubt, however, twisted through him like a serpent. What vulnerabilities could emerge from the shadows next? Jake knew deep down that this was only the beginning of what lay ahead, a path fraught with both risks and revelations. He could feel the pulse of change coursing through him. This time he would not shy away. But as he prepared to confront whatever lay beyond, he realized he was standing on the precipice of not just his truth, but possibly larger forces pushing against him. What would emerge from opening this door wider? The moment was looming, and Jake could sense the waters stirring ominously beneath the surface, ready to surge. Jake's mind raced as he processed the enormity of what lay ahead. The conversation with Mr. Henderson had ignited something within him, a brush with potential that both exhilarated and terrified him. This collaboration was no small decision. With a single breath, he felt the weight of vulnerability settle into his bones. As he dismissed Mr. Henderson with a vague agreement to meet again, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on a precipice. He put on a facade of calm, yet inside, he felt chaos brewing. Did he really want to expose himself to the world? The prospect of sharing his story filled him with a blend of excitement and dread. He grabbed his camera and stared at it, a tool that had been a source of refuge and defiance. It was almost as if it could tell him what to do next. Days passed in a blur. Each moment became infused with deliberation. Following that initial conversation, Jake found himself restless. He wandered through the city, each corner heavy with memories of the past, the anger, the betrayal, and moments when he felt utterly lost in the noise of the world. But now, fragments of inspiration began to weave their way through his doubts. He discovered new angles to consider while filming his video. Instead of solely focusing on the incident that had defined him, Jake started exploring why sharing his truth mattered. He began capturing snippets of conversations with people around him, individuals whose narratives resonated with his own struggles. Each exchange ignited deeper reflections on courage and sacrifice, illuminating the human spirit's resilience. Jake became a student of these moments. He recorded people's laughter and their pain, their stories threaded together in a way he'd never anticipated. Each story was its own echo, feeding into his purpose. He was transforming from a mere observer to a narrator of an unseen tapestry. Yet with this creative surge came the gnawing reality of the upcoming meeting arranged by Mr. Henderson. As the day approached, the weight of responsibility became tangible. Questions haunted him. Would the others accept his voice? Would they understand the essence of his battle? In moments alone, he found himself wrestling with self-doubt. Before the meeting, Jake decided to visit an old acquaintance, Kevin, a veteran like himself who often doubted whether his own trauma could resonate with anyone. As they sat across from each other in a dimly lit diner, conversations swirled around shared experiences, each cocktail of frustration and hope bubbling to the surface. "I don't know if my story matters to anyone but me," Kevin sighed, stirring his coffee as if seeking clarity in the swirling liquid. "That's where you're wrong," Jake retorted, a spark igniting within him. "We've all been through hell and our truths matter. Yours might just save someone." In that moment, a profound realization struck Jake. The purpose behind sharing their stories was not merely for their own healing, but for the possibility of validating others' experiences. He felt empowered in Kevin's presence. The conversation ignited something within him, a commitment to carry this newfound awareness into the upcoming meeting. As Jake walked home that evening, the air felt charged with determination. He understood now the gravity of the platform he was about to step onto, his personal stakes intertwined with a larger cause. He wasn't just revealing his truth. He was acting as a conduit for collective voices. Arriving back at his apartment, Jake fired up his editing software, piecing together fragments of laughter and tears he had recorded. They became more than clips on a screen. They became a vivid expression of solidarity, a fierce declaration against isolation. He felt empowered by the realization that vulnerability was not weakness, but a call to bravery. Yet as he prepared for the meeting, questions lingered. Would confronting his fears with this circle of voices lead to a deeper understanding or further isolation? And could his courageous act of sharing invite forces he wasn't prepared to confront? He glanced at the timeline of his project on the screen. His heart raced as he contemplated the stories of those he had captured alongside his own narrative. Just before shutting down the computer, he saved the latest cut, knowing this was not just a personal film, but a potential movement of truth and connection. As the clock ticked down to the meeting, Jake felt the chill of anticipation wrap around him, a burgeoning storm of hope and uncertainty. He steadied his breath, ready to embrace whatever was to come. Would he be met with acceptance, or would the scrutiny of others drown out his voice? Jake knew now he stood at the edge of revelation, each moment tinged with the weight of his honesty. The door to his truth was about to swing wide open. But what lay on the threshold? The meeting arrived sooner than Jake anticipated. Dressed in a simple button-up shirt that felt too tight around his throat, he stood outside the conference room, the muffled sounds of murmured conversations filtering through the door. The palpable buzz of anticipation made his heart thump harder. A few deep breaths steadied his nerves, but doubt intermingled with resolve. What if they saw him for the fragile spirit he felt inside? Would they judge him for trying to balance his vulnerability with the weight of storytelling? He couldn't shake off the feeling that the moment he stepped into that room, he would be bearing more than just his scars. He would unveil the raw, unrefined core of himself. As Jake entered, he found a diverse group already seated around a large table. To his relief, their expressions seemed welcoming, tinged with curiosity rather than suspicion. He recognized a few familiar faces, fellow veterans, bearing their own battles in weary eyes. "Jake!" Mr. Henderson waved from his seat. "Glad you could make it." Jake nodded and took his place at the table, his camera resting on the table before him like a silent ally. He noticed the softer tones exchanged, the tentative smiles, all suggestive of shared histories. This was more than a meeting. This was the meeting, the ignition of collective narratives. "Let's kick things off," Mr. Henderson said, addressing the group. "Today, we're here to talk about how we can use our stories to resonate with others. Each of you has something valuable to share." When it was Jake's turn to speak, his instinct was to bury himself in the comfort of his camera, to filter the world through its lens rather than confront it directly. He hesitated, then took a breath and decided to shed the protective layer he often relied on. "I've been filming my experiences," he began, his voice steady, yet quiet. "But it's not just my own story. It's about understanding the struggle of others too." As his words unfurled, he poured his heart into the space. He spoke of his fears, the weight of expectation, the need to ensure his vulnerability translated into something meaningful for others. He revealed the snippets of conversation with Kevin, sharing their heart-to-heart in the diner, and how that had transformed his understanding of vulnerability. Something shifted in the room. Nods of acknowledgement replaced skepticism, and he felt the warmth of connection seep into his chest. Each shared smile, each murmur of understanding fueled a fire within him. Our truths, no matter how painful, can help others find their strength. When he finished, a weight lifted off his shoulders. And though a million fears still clung to him, the reaction from the group was overwhelmingly supportive. They shared their own bits of pain and joy, threading their stories into a tapestry of resilience and connection. Jake felt himself grow, not simply as an artist, but as a crucial voice in this evolving narrative. He listened intently when Laura, a single mother and combat medic, recounted her struggles after returning to civilian life. Her story mirrored aspects of his own, and in the telling they both found comfort and courage. As he contributed to forming the group's vision, something unexpected emerged from the depths of his mind, a realization that his creative endeavors could serve a larger purpose if cultivated with care. This wasn't just about sharing their pain, it was about crafting a narrative that might just heal others. Yet within the elation came the sharp pang of anxiety. With each connection forged, he was also reminded of the darkness that pursued him, the whispers of doubt, the shadow lurking behind every revelation. Would his openness invite the scrutiny of others who might not understand? Would he be prepared for those uncomfortable moments of criticism or challenge from outsiders? Jake's eyes fell back onto the camera, a steady reminder of his intention. As the meeting drew to a close, he sensed a new dawn on the horizon, a beckoning call to evolve further as both a storyteller and a human. But amid this newfound strength, he couldn't ignore the nagging thought that lingered just below the surface. What if the momentary acceptance he felt wouldn't last? As he looked around the room, faces buried in thought, he pondered the next crucial step. How would he extend this openness beyond this space? Feeling a flicker of unease mixed with determination, he resolved to confront the next chapter of his journey. Now wasn't the time to retreat. It was the time to push further into the uncomfortable realm of honesty and courage. In the coming days, Jake would need to face a challenging choice. A confrontation with those who held different perspectives on vulnerability and truth. Little did he know, the path ahead might lead him toward revelations he had yet to grapple with, ones that would culminate in a powerful and unsettling truth about himself. Jake stepped out of the conference room, a deliberate resolve grounding him as he navigated the hallways of the building. Each step was heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. For the first time, he'd shared his vulnerability openly, and though the response had been positive, he couldn't shake the creeping anguish that came with his transparency. The exhilaration of connection mingled with a haunting fear of judgment, of misinterpretation. He knew he had shared pieces of himself, fragments woven with narratives that others could grasp. Yet he also understood that many would still misunderstand or dismiss the deeper implications of his words. Questions thrummed through his mind, challenging his newfound momentum. How would he navigate those who were skeptical? What would he say in moments when disapproval loomed? He wandered into an empty cafe nearby, seeking solace in the anonymity of strangers. As he stirred his coffee, his thoughts turned inward, grappling with the complexity of his mission. What does honesty really entail? He wondered. In moments of introspection, the weight of his story felt a little lighter. He remembered Laura's eyes as she spoke of her struggles, a flash of recognition that sparked warmth in his spirit. Might such connections not endure just within those office walls? Could the power of shared truth reach even further, creating ripples of understanding in an indifferent world? Yet, darkness was a lurking companion for Jake. With every inch he moved toward authenticity, a fear nagged at the edges of his resolve. He needed to confront a crucial hurdle, a family full of silent skeptics, including a brother who had become increasingly critical of his artistic pursuits, suggesting that Jake was wasting his potential. What if he's right? Jake thought bitterly, battling the desire to prove himself. This impending confrontation brewed tension within him. He had long avoided discussions with his brother, preferring to navigate his emotional landscape in solitude. However, everything felt different now. His art represented not just himself, but a voice for those who felt unheard. It was time to stop retreating. While he pondered, he resolved to invite his brother for lunch, a chance to embrace discomfort rather than evade it. Maybe by explaining his passion, he could bridge the wide chasm of misunderstanding between them. Jake understood he had to confront those familial shadows, fully aware of the potential fallout. This was about revealing himself, to his brother, to the world. Jake felt his heart quicken. He needed to prepare. As he returned home, he scripted out the conversation in his mind, imagining potential arguments, defenses. Yet, with each preparation, he also felt a burgeoning sense of empowerment. He would practice his delivery before facing the inevitable interrogation. As the clock ticked closer to their lunch date, nervous excitement churned in his stomach. Was he ready for the pushback? Would he be capable of articulating how vulnerable yet transformative this journey had been for him? Doubt swirled in unpredictable patterns, but Jake fought to reclaim control, clinging to the belief that this was not just about him. With determination coursing through his veins, he embraced the urgency of the moment, the need to bring about change for himself and potentially for his brother. What might unfold when he sat across from the person he had always sought to please? What hidden truths would emerge from the shadows? The answers loomed just outside his reach, but the very process of confrontation electrified him. Jake realized that his mission was not only about sharing his art, it was entwined with fighting for his self-worth and the authenticity of his voice, one that could pierce through judgment and forge understanding where none existed before. As he prepared for his brother's arrival, he clenched his fists, ready to embrace the turbulence ahead. Little did he know, this lunch would not only echo truths of the past, but would also reveal something startling about their shared history, intertwining their lives in ways neither could have foreseen. Jake arrived at the chosen lunch spot, a small restaurant tucked away from the city's bustle. The familiar sense of grilled vegetables and baked bread filled the air, grounding him slightly as he scanned the room for his brother. Just the thought of facing his skepticism was enough to heighten the tension in his chest. He chose a table near the window, allowing the natural light to bathe him in warmth, a stark contrast to the chill of apprehension that gripped his heart. As he fidgeted with his napkin, memories flitted through his mind. Their childhood, laughter and arguments over trivial matters, the closeness that seemed to fade as adulthood drew them apart. Was it inevitable that they would diverge, or was it a consequence of Jake's choices? The latter weighed heavily as he anticipated their conversation. Moments passed and tension coiled tighter. Just when he thought he would break, his brother, Mark, walked in, a casual demeanor masking a tight expression. The resemblance was striking, yet Jake noticed how their paths had sculpted different contours on their faces. Mark greeted him with a curt nod, and the briefest flash of a smile as he settled into the chair across from Jake. "Thanks for meeting up," Jake began, his voice steadier than he felt. "Sure, what's up?" Mark's tone was neutral, but Jake could sense an underlying disinterest that felt like an impenetrable barrier. Swallowing hard, Jake steered the conversation straight into uncomfortable territory. "I wanted to talk about my art. I know you have your doubts about it." Mark leaned back, arms crossing defensively. "Doubts?" he echoed, eyebrows raised. "It's not about doubts, Jake. It's about realism. You're pushing 30. You need stability, a career." The word stung, each syllable cutting through the sanctuary he had tried to create around his artistic passions. "But what if this is my stability?" Jake shot back, surprised at the fierceness in his tone. The flush of anger surprised him, but as quickly as it surged, self-doubt joined it. Was he overstepping? Mark's eyes narrowed. "You mean your hobby?" He leaned forward, voice firm. "Listen, this isn't some small-town passion. It's about making it, really making it." Jake took a breath, grounding himself. "I used to think that achieving success meant conforming to societal expectations, but I've started to see it differently. My art isn't just a hobby, it's a reflection of who I am. It's how I connect with others who feel lost." For a heartbeat, silence wrapped around them. Jake filled the space with gratitude for this confrontation, that it was happening at all. He had long envisioned this moment as a duel, but instead, it morphed into something fragile, revealing an invisible wound as both men clashed. "What do you mean by connect?" Mark asked finally, his voice softer, perhaps intrigued. "It's a response to what I've felt inside. When I create, it's not just paint on a canvas. It's an attempt to reach someone else, that they're not alone. Did you know I almost gave up last year?" Mark's brows furrowed. Something shifted behind his stoic facade. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jake hesitated, the question a mirror reflecting years of unspoken pain. "Because it would have meant admitting I was struggling. I wanted to be strong for you." "You wanted to be strong for me?" Mark looked taken aback, anger giving way to confusion and concern. "Jake, you shouldn't have to fight this alone." A flicker of hope ignited in Jake's chest. Was this the opportunity he had sought? To share the burden? To create understanding? Yet as he peered deeper into Mark's eyes, he sensed walls remaining intact, their history playing a silent role in the unfolding conversation. "Maybe we've both been avoiding the truth," Jake asserted, feeling the weight of his words. "But I need you to be honest with me. Why do you really doubt my path?" An uneasy silence settled between them as Mark's mouth tightened into a thin line. What would unravel next? Would Mark accept this new facet of his brother, this vulnerability that Jake had dared to present? Before Mark could respond, Jake felt the unsettling realization that their shared history might not be ready to yield its secrets just yet. What truths were still buried, waiting for the right moment to emerge? The pause stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Mark's grip on the tabletop tightened, his knuckles whitened as he struggled with his thoughts. Jake watched with a mix of anticipation and dread, wondering if emerging revelations would build bridges or ignite further conflict. "Honestly," Mark finally said, his voice carefully measured, "I just don't want you to fail. You've always been idealistic. It's great, but life is hard, Jake. I didn't want the world to crush you." Jake's chest tightened at the weight of those words. It felt almost like a betrayal, but on reflection, he realized that Mark's perspective was rooted in concern, not disdain. "But you have to let me carve my own path," Jake insisted. "It's not about avoiding failure, it's about learning to rise from it." As he spoke, he sensed a shift within himself. Each word felt like a stepping stone, allowing him to tread into a territory marked by authenticity. It wasn't just about expressing his artistic ambition to Mark. It was about asserting his right to choose. With that realization came a small, flickering ember of self-empowerment, the kind he had been seeking since the moment he picked up a brush. Mark began to soften, his shoulders dropping slightly as he absorbed Jake's words. "I get that, I really do. But art is a gamble, and you need to be prepared for what comes with it. I've never shied away from risks." Jake smiled faintly, starting to see the humor in a brother challenging him to be more than he thought he could be. "And I might surprise you." A nervous laugh escaped Mark, and for a moment, they shared in the amusement. But as quickly as the tension eased, something else flickered in Mark's demeanor. A flicker of doubt tangled with concern again. The balance hanging between them felt precarious, like a tightrope dance with no safety net. Jake sensed this and leaned in, sympathetic. "Mark, I need you to trust that I have the tenacity and determination to make this work. You say I'm idealistic, but what if that's precisely what the world needs?" A moment of introspection settled over Mark's features. He remained silent, but the change was palpable. The unyielding energy that had previously cloaked their conversation began to dissipate, revealing a sliver of understanding. Perhaps this was a turning point, not just in their dialogue but a hint towards healing mutual wounds. "Then maybe I should take a step back and really consider your perspective," Mark replied cautiously. "I suppose we've both been holding on to our beliefs without hearing each other." The acknowledgement pricked at something deep inside Jake. With each breath he felt the edges of self-doubt blurring slightly. This hadn't been merely a confrontation, it was a chance at connection. Yet amidst this glimmer of hope, a thought gnawed at him. Was Mark ready to step out of his own shadows just as Jake was attempting to do? "Can we work on this together?" Jake posed. "I'm not looking for a free pass. I want your critique, your honesty, but I need to know you'll support me." The moment hung heavy in the air, full of promise yet still teetering on the brink of skepticism. Mark took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, as though weighing his choices meticulously. "We could try that. Just promise me you won't neglect practicality." A sense of warmth washed over Jake. "I promise." The conversation shifted subtly, morphing from questions and concerns into explorative gestures. Yet Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the core of their issues still lay undiscovered. He felt positioned at the cusp of change, but it relied heavily on Mark's readiness to embrace uncertainty and his own vulnerabilities. Just as the conversation began to solidify into a more productive exchange, an unexpected figure swept into the restaurant's entrance. A rush of tension infiltrated the air again, an unwelcome interruption, leaving Jake questioning if he could maintain his stride towards authenticity, or if the path was veering into unsettling territory. As Mark looked up, a frown began to form on his face, apprehension echoing in the depths of Jake's mind. Who was this newcomer, and how would they affect not only this conversation, but Jake's burgeoning confidence to pursue his art? Jake's anxiety surged as he recognized the familiar figure stepping into the restaurant. It was Derek, an old acquaintance from the community, and the very last person Jake wanted to see right now. Derek's glances were often filled with judgment, an unwelcome harbinger from Jake's past, the past he was trying to escape with newfound resolve. As Derek wandered closer, Jake's heart pounded against his ribs. It felt like the universe had conspired against him, threatening the delicate bridge he was building with Mark. The moment hung thick, a ticking time bomb waiting for the slightest pressure to explode. "Jake! Didn't expect to find you here." Derek's voice cut through the air, the familiarity laced with an undercurrent of mockery that made Jake bristle. "Hey, Derek," Jake managed, forcing a tight smile, all the while wishing he could merely vanish into the booth. Mark's posture shifted defensively, and Jake could see the sudden tension between them. "What do you want?" his brother asked, much sharper than he intended. Derek shrugged, maintaining an air of casualness. "Just grabbing a bite. Heard you're doing some art stuff now." His voice danced mockingly at the edges, as if the very idea of Jake's passion was laughable. Jake took a moment to gather his breath, feeling the weight of vulnerability rise again. "Yeah, that's the plan," he replied, an edge of uncertainty creeping in. "Really? You think that's a viable career?" Derek leaned down on the table. "Don't you see it's all a gamble? You could end up broken bitter." Silence fell heavily after Derek's proclamation, pressing down on Jake's resolve. It felt like the air had knocked out of the entirely delicate conversation he was beginning to rebuild with Mark. "I'm not afraid of taking risks," Jake countered, voice steadying despite the inner turmoil. "It's about expressing who I am, about connecting with those who feel the same way." Derek scoffed, arms crossed. "Yeah, right. Let's see how long you can survive on expressing yourself. An internal struggle unfolded in Jake. The anger rose, but alongside it was something else. The deep-rooted fear of failure that Derek embodied to him. He could feel the ancient echo of doubt clawing its way back to the surface. Mark shifted uncomfortably, looking from brother to acquaintance. "Listen, Jake's just trying to figure things out," he interjected, his tone softer yet firm. "Why don't you just let him be?" Derek's expression softened slightly, but returned with an insistence that stung. "I get it. But when reality hits, you two will be looking at unemployment lines." Before he could finish, Jake interrupted, fueled by a renewed sense of determination. "You don't get it, Derek. You've never walked my path. Life is more than just a job or a paycheck. For me, art is my lifeline. It's the connection these stories provide that bring me joy and purpose." Derek seemed taken aback, perhaps surprised by Jake's assertiveness. Instead of retreating, Jake pressed forward, feeling the tension spiderweb into a new energy. "I'm willing to fail to find what resonates, to learn from my missteps." What's so wrong with that? For the first time, Mark met Jake's eyes, sparks of pride igniting within him. He could sense the shift in Jake, a defiance rising against the voices of disbelief. "Do you even believe what you say?" Derek retorted sharply. "I do," Jake said firmly, each word resonating with conviction. "My truth matters, and I'll fight for it." Derek's silence spoke volumes. He was disarmed, even if just momentarily. The challenge between them hung palpably in the air. Suddenly, Mark's voice emerged, steady and unwavering. "Maybe more of us should fight for our truths, regardless of how risky it seems. We all have a voice." Derek's sneer faltered, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. Jake watched curiously as the tension their conversation had built began to unravel, not through anger, but awareness. "Maybe all of you should consider a more grounded approach," Derek retorted. But this time it lacked conviction. Jake saw a glimpse of uncertainty in Derek's posture. "You might want to consider that what you think isn't the only way forward," Jake said gently. "Art has brought me clarity in navigating my life. Perhaps even you could try to look at it from a fresh perspective." Derek blinked, a transformation quiet yet potent rippling through the air. "Art?" Jake felt the seeds of doubt calming. He'd engaged Derek, not with anger but with confidence, clarity, and the sheer weight of belief in his narrative. There was empowerment in that around the table, each question twisting into an opportunity for understanding. As the minutes passed and the conversation ebbed and flowed, Jake realized that something had shifted within himself. It was no longer merely about confronting his brother or fending off old acquaintances. It was a deeper realization of what standing firm in his truth meant. Speaking out wasn't just an act of defense. It was about embracing who he was, weaknesses and all. With Mark supporting him, Jake felt a camaraderie spark between them, setting a foundation no skeptical voice could shatter. Despite Derek's lingering discontent, Jake also understood that a person could only be ready to change by choosing to step beyond their own shadows. In this new light, Jake recognized that personal accomplishment was rooted in this ongoing journey, not a destination. As lunch wrapped up, that flicker of hope, resilience, and the shared essence of honesty hung around them warmly, paving a way to explore deeper connections without fear. Stepping out of the restaurant, Jake turned to Mark. "Thank you for believing." A bond surfaced, fragile yet unwavering. Together they began to walk away, both knowing the passage ahead still held uncertainties, yet fortified by the unmistakable realization that supportive connections could outweigh the challenges that awaited them. It was an achievement, if nothing else, a chorale of triumph rising from uncertainty. This marked not just the healing of Jake's own voice, but a stirring path that promised exploration beyond individual fears, encompassing a broader vision where voices would intertwine in solidarity and understanding. And from this moment on, Jake would embrace storytelling as a powerful beacon to connect not only with others, but within himself. Wearily, yet resolutely, he felt ready to confront whatever lay ahead. It felt like a homecoming, reclaiming his narrative and emerging empowered, with his brother by his side. Now it was time for Jake to build on this growing momentum and take it to new heights. As they strolled away, a surge of energy coursed through him. This was only the beginning. Would you like to delve into more inspiring stories of transformation and the human spirit? You need to subscribe now, or you might miss the next exclusive emotional journey that awaits. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep the fire of these incredible stories burning brightly. Comment below with your reactions or theories on how this journey continues. Your insights could spark even more conversations. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who absolutely must see how powerful and essential telling one's truth can be.